Welcome to Bedtime Whispers, where darkness comes to life and nightmares become reality. I was about 6 or 7 at the time. I don't remember exactly, but I was already in school. My father was in the military, so we often moved from place to place, never staying more than a year, and we only lasted a year once, which was a record. I had just started school, and my father decided to do everything he could to settle down somewhere for at least a year or 9 months, so that I could get used to school, understand what it was all about, get used to the staff. My father was then thrown into the Leningrad region in an unremarkable little town just outside of St. Petersburg. There were a lot of old pre-war houses there. They frightened me with their gloominess, darkness, and some silence, and also with the cold. Both in summer and in winter the staircases were dog cold. We had an apartment in one of these houses. They used to be communal houses, so the rooms were very big and spacious, connected by a big hallway and a long corridor with the kitchen and bathroom at the end. We had 2 large rooms of 3 connected by a common passage. The 3rd room was closed, but that's not the point. There was also a closet. We didn't even notice it at first. It was right in the hallway, with a shabby, sturdy white door on the left. It was clear that it was a closet, since there were other apartments behind the wall, and a room, at least a big one, couldn't be behind it. And in such communal apartments, the pantries were usually the size of a small or even standard room. My parents tried to open it at the time, but it didn't work. It was locked. That's the end of it. They spit on it, locked, and my acquaintance with the closet began the next day or a little later. I do not remember exactly. Anyway, I came home from school, did my homework, and started playing. My mother was in the kitchen, which was practically on the other side of the planet, so it seemed to me at the time. My room was almost at the front door, and the kitchen was at the very end of the hallway. I could vaguely hear my mother doing things, but it was all very far away, and I felt like I was alone. This is where I first met him. Rolling the car, I ran out with it into the hallway, since there was hardly any furniture there, playing to myself, and suddenly I heard a creaking sound. The closet door opened and a boy came out. An ordinary boy. No, not really an ordinary boy. He was very pale, with large eyes, and his face was unpleasant and very thin, and he was thin, too. I was very thin myself at that time. All my relatives told me so, as usual, but the boy was even thinner than I was, and the skin on his arms was tight round his bones. Otherwise, he was just like me, an ordinary boy, only his clothes were shabby and very dusty. I was young, and everyone knows that children look at many things very differently. It seemed to me then, too, that it was normal for a boy to live in our closet. At first, the boy watched me play and was silent. I couldn't stand it and asked, "Who are you?" He was silent. I asked him 2 or 3 times, and he stayed quiet and watched. And then he just said, "Is the bombing over?" I didn't understand. Of course. What bombing? Who was that kid? I looked around. Nobody was bombing anything, so I answered that it was over. Then I remember I invited him to play with me, and we played together. That's how my first acquaintance with my friend, whom my parents called imaginary, took place. I remember this first meeting clearly, but after that I remember it only in fragments, as if my memory had been lost and was being partially restored, which was almost the case, in fact. But I know for a fact that I played with him all the time now. I would come home from school, do my homework, and then I would go to the closet, knock, and the boy would come out. I tried to find out his name and why he lived in the closet, but he wouldn't say anything. And when I questioned him hard, he would go back into the closet silently. His mother did not see him, and he did not show his face to her either. As soon as she heard her footsteps in the corridor, he climbed back into the closet. At first, she had nothing to do with it, but then she started scolding me, explaining that there was no boy, and that the closet was closed, and there was no way to open it. At first, we were just playing, but then he started asking me to do things, very bad things. I knew it even then. One day he asked me to open the gas, and I did it. Thank God my mother got there in time. I got in a lot of trouble, and I didn't know why. Then he asked me to kill one of the pigeons that used to sit on our windows, that my mother used to feed them. I didn't want to do that anymore, because I knew it was wrong to kill birds. Then he did it himself, just twisted the pigeon's neck and handed it to me. That's how my mother saw me alone, with a dead pigeon in her hands. They didn't want to take me to a psychiatrist. My father was in the army. It could have affected his work. They scolded me. My father even beat me with a belt then, though he had never raised his hands before. I think what also horrified them was that I kept saying that it wasn't me, but my friend, that boy. Now that so many years have passed, I understand how my parents felt. I looked like a madman, like a future maniac, but I didn't do that. The boy wasn't at school, by the way. He said he couldn't go there. I didn't do anything wrong there. But as the teacher told my mother, I became very sleepy, withdrawn, didn't communicate with any of my classmates, didn't listen attentively in class. After 5 months of such a life, my mother began to say that it was time to move, to change his surroundings. She herself did not like it in this apartment. She said it was very dark, uncomfortable, and lonely, and the walls felt pressured. She also heard children's laughter at night, but she thought it was her nerves. No one even thought about going to church to consecrate the apartment. It was still the Soviet Union, although the last years, and no one believed in God. And if they believed, they were silent about it. As it turned out, my father was not assigned anywhere, and he did not even think about asking me to leave. On the contrary, he had recently asked me to let him stay in one place for a long time. That's how we lived. I began to understand that my friend was not very good, since he was asking me to do bad things, and I tried not to be friends with him. I wouldn't go to him during the day, but then he would come to me at night, and that was even scarier. How many times I woke up and he was standing silently beside my bed, pale and very thin. As my mother said later, I had changed a lot. I had lost my temper. I became angry, withdrawn, and cried a lot. In the spring, finally, my father was given a new assignment. I remember what a sense of relief I felt looking at the suitcases assembled in the hallway. But in the morning, the day before my departure, I suddenly felt the urge to say goodbye to my friend. I don't know what motivated me at the time. On the contrary, I had to get out of there as soon as possible, not to go near the shabby door, and I knocked on it, and I told him I was leaving. The boy looked at me for a long time, and then he opened the door, behind which there was total darkness, and said, "Do you want to see where I lie?" Of course, I wanted to. I was curious. I stepped into that darkness, and I felt myself being violently pushed there, into the very depths, into the darkness, where it smelled of dust and old age and decay. I don't remember anything else. Then I heard from my mother that she came into the room, and I was gone. She started looking, but I was nowhere to be found, like I had vanished into thin air. And then she heard a scream from the locked pantry. She tried to open it, but she couldn't. The door would not open because, according to my parents, it was closed all the time. My mother began to call my father in tears. He came, and the door was broken down. Inside, among the old junk and old children's toys, I was lying there, unconscious. I was taken to the hospital then, and my mother told me that when they were taking me out of the apartment, the old neighbors on the bench whispered, and my mother clearly heard one say, "Timoshka is spoiling again. God rest his soul." And the other said, "God, I'm in the middle of praying for the devil here." I woke up in the hospital with absolutely no memory of how I ended up in the closet, why I was screaming, or what had happened to me. The next day we went very far away from there. I went to another school in another city, became a cheerful, sociable boy again, made friends, studied well, did sports, and was, as they say, the joy and pride of my parents. Memories of that time came by the age of 15, and gradually I remembered more and more. One day I ventured to ask my mother about it, and she confirmed my memories. From that moment, by the way, she did not treat my friend as imaginary, shuddering to think of Timoshka, whom the neighbors talked about. Thank you so much for your attention. Subscribe to the channel. See you soon.